Will the Clemson game be another nail in the coffin for Mike Norvell?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Folks, we are to that point. I am done being, shall we say, lied to, connived, or otherwise led astray. Mike Norvell is not the guy. This will be, at the end of this season, 4 of 5 years that the Florida State Seminoles finish with a losing record under Mike Norvell's direction. They're currently 1-4, and the stats I'm about to give you are appalling by MAC standards, let alone a team that just went to the ACC. Won it, and now they're 1-4 and a laughingstock in college football. So let me explain in pieces, and we'll go through this pretty easily. Mike Norvell's a great guy by everything that I've heard. Pretty good play caller, pretty good at understanding team dynamics in general, but not everybody's perfect. I get that. But he's also made some catastrophic mistakes along the way. Jordan Travis has bailed him out some, Trey Benson, some of the guys that he had from the portal. Those things were great, but he missed on a bunch of portal guys this year, and that leads to the first big nail. Recruiting. As I've noted on this show numerous times, it was a matter of only when, not if, Florida State would eventually run into a wall if they did not recruit definitively out of the high school ranks at a high level and then develop them. Happened a little faster than I thought it would, but it is here. Losing 42-16 to SMU, a team that is in its first year in the true Power Four, is not acceptable. Being obliterated like that, the way they did, wasn't even competitive in the second half, just adds fuel to the fire. So here are some of the numbers, and here's some of the thoughts and questions that I have for the Florida State fan base to kind of give you an awakening. Some of you may have already been there. I know that some of you on Saturday night's live chat, which I downloaded 2 different episodes today on Sunday about it, but here's the deal. This is just going to keep going. So we need to find out how much longer, what do you think, and why for Mike Norvell. I'm saying he gets fired by the end of next season, period. That's where I'm at. Prove me wrong. Here's why. Recruiting, 2020, 2021. I did an episode on this a couple weeks ago. Whacked big time. Offensive line, defensive line, quarterback. Those groups of players would be seniors, fifth-year seniors right now. The 2 6th-years, the left tackle and center, are 6th-year seniors, just for those of you who know. Pretty much the other guys that have come in, there have been a lot of transfers. There's been a few guys that have been banged up, unfortunately. But most of the guys I've recruited, especially on the offensive line, it's not gone well. That's on Norvell. He hired this staff. You're going to hear me say this over and over. He hired this staff. He did not finish in recruiting. They missed badly at quarterback for years. Where is the result? 2, looking at the defense, they've gotten some pretty good guys. I mean, Patrick Payton, they took out of Miami. Really good recruit. That's a kid they got, and they developed. But he's the exception, not the rule. Too many guys are in that boat. Joshua Farmer certainly played a lot better here lately, but then the SMU game happened. As a final stat, just to put it in perspective for you, Florida State's game against Louisville, you know how many yards they gave up rushing right up the middle? Farmer being there, this is embarrassing. 213 yards rushing for the SMU Mustangs. Now, I know part of that is on other players. I'm not just picking on Joshua because he's had pretty good games the last couple of weeks going into that. But overall, Florida State beyond the first quarter had a few moments, but they couldn't get off the field on 3rd down. They didn't tackle well. They didn't have good angles. Those coaches are responsible. Who hired those coaches? Mike Norvell. Going to special teams, it's the one unit. Let's be honest. Let's give credit where it's due. Kicker-punter combination at Florida State, elite. Absolutely elite. But that's not going to win you football games. Coverage units have been good, etc. They've done all those things. That's great. But when you're punting all the time, that's not a good thing to talk about. Mastromanno, nothing against him. He's going to play in the NFL. That should not be a talking point for me at the beginning of a show. Ever, ever, ever. But yet it is. Florida State is in trouble. Now, with recruiting 2022 and 23 to help alleviate some of these problems, they had some pretty good recruits. Weren't elite classes, but they were good. 2024 class, certainly Norvell's best. Some of those guys will start getting on the field. Cam's already obviously playing. Cam Davis. Everybody saw that coming. Very physical, very fast, just a natural football player, and he's a smart young man. He picks up scheme. But we need more of those kinds of players in Tallahassee to get out of this hole. And Florida State is in a massive one. Do not let it kid yourself. But who's handing off to Cam, to L? I mean, LT's a great running back in terms of talent, catching the ball, making guys miss and all that. But he needs a passing game to help him so he doesn't have eight in the box. Same with Cam. They picked DJ. Who's the head coach that picked the coaches to go get DJ? Oh, that's Mike Norvell. Obviously, that's not working. I want to go into the absolutely horrendous passing. They've gotten worse, believe it or not. They honestly have. The absolutely horrendous numbers for Florida in just a moment. But think about it. Every one of these big box decisions eventually comes back to Mike. And he's an offensive guy. That's why I started with the offensive numbers. What are we doing here? This is Florida State. This is a school when I was growing up was slinging it all over the yard in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, killing people because they just could. They could tell you what they were going to do, and they did it. You don't have to be 10-2 or better every year, but, I mean, Florida State's not going to make a bowl game this year. Florida State's not going to make a bowl. Think about that for a second. I was hook, line, and sinkered into thinking based on the game that they played the week prior. They got a victory. Hey, they found a way to beat Cal. Defense played well, but that was against a really bad offensive line. SMU's offensive line's a little better than I thought. And quite frankly, good for them. But they shouldn't run for 213 yards. And then just for fun here, just to give you a little more of a nuance of what's going on, a quarterback who's only started a handful of games in his career. This is Kevin Jennings' line. 16 of 23, 254, 3 touchdowns, no picks, 70% completion rating, 205.4 in his rating by college there. It's a little different than pro. And as a runner, he didn't have a bad night either. He had 9 runs for 12 yards. That includes sacks. He'd have been in the 20s, low 30s as a quarterback trying to scramble. Not bad. He killed Florida State. Big plays. And good for Kevin, bad for FSU. This is just a train wreck that's going off the rail. I'm just the one that's honest enough to admit it, and I'm sure I'm going to get a bunch of comments on YouTube saying you're ridiculous, this and that. Go right ahead. If I'm wrong at the end of next year, it'll be best for me because covering this is not fun. Watching this is no fun. Trying to analyze this is just absolutely banging my head on a wall. With that, let's go into Florida State's passing numbers. Completion percentage for the season. All these are for the year. 52.2%. There are 134 teams in the FBS. You know what that ranks the Florida State Seminoles? 128th. They are dead last in the Power 4 teams in passing completion percentage. Dead last. Vanderbilt, Rice, schools like that are right there or better than them. And it just teams that never win. Bottom of the road MAC teams have better numbers. Then Florida State. Bobby Bowden is rolling in his grave. Touchdown passes. The Noles are 109th. They have 4. Interceptions thrown. They're 111th. They have 6. Passing yards per game. They improve here. 213 per game. That's 61st. Passing plays of 20 or more yards. A critical stat for wins and losses in college football or pro. They are 48th in the nation. They have 16. At least they're top 50 in something. I'll give them that. When you go to the running game, and obviously one helps the other or not, this is all the main stats that I came up with that I thought were pertinent for the rushing attack for the Noles. Yards per game, 65.2, 131st. I believe there's like one team worse than them in the FBS, but again, it's just atrocious. Touchdowns, 4, 111th Average yards per carry, 2.36 at Florida State, 131st. Again, there are only 134 teams. Running plays of 20 or more yards. This might be the most insane number of all the stats that I'm going to give you today. Ready for this? Are you sitting down? Florida State has 2 plays, according to CFB stats, of 20 or more yards running the football. 2. That ranks them 112th. How in the world, with all of Florida State's speed, do they have 2? They do not lack talent in the backfield. They do not. I know they've had some injuries and whatnot, but they have a considerable amount of talent. That is insane. And then another stat that kind of helps explain a little bit of it, at least. How many tackles for loss have you allowed as an offensive line, tight ends, everybody blocking, guys making guys miss, all that kind of stuff? Tackles for loss. They have 31 already that they've endured. That is 103rd in the nation. So as you can see, Florida State is obviously struggling. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Norvell's track record at Florida State, his record, etc., and what's happened at this point, and why we should think it could turn around. That's next at Locked On Seminoles. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats right on FanDuel, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. So why should we believe anything's going to change? I don't. I'm a numbers guy. I say it all the time on this show. I'm very consistent with it. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But here are the hard, cold facts. Norvell took over, and his first season was 2020. Record was 3-6. 2021, 5-7. 22, 10-3. 23, 13-1. This year, 1-4. Combined record, 32-21. That is not going to get it done. It's just not going to get it done. Winning percentage, 60.37. And they're headed in the wrong direction. He's going to be below 60% before much longer, a couple more games. State is going to be in a scenario where they're going to be in a bad spot. Do you believe all of a sudden that things are going to get better, even if they put Brock Glenn in, and I'll talk about that in a second? Do you believe all of a sudden they're going to win? Not just improve, win. Debatable. I mean, at this point, I'm all in on letting Brock play. I know he was 0 for 4 the other night, but I mean, end of the game, bad scenario. I'm not going to put much stock in that. But do you really think that this team can turn it around? Well, one of the first things you do to figure that out is to literally go through the schedule, look at the calendar, and put some common sense into the theory that they can or cannot. So let's do that. Florida State's next game is obviously not the easiest. It's a team that's rather hot right now and scoring a lot of points. Not exactly the best thing for Florida State. This is a game I thought they were going to win at the beginning of the season. It was going to be the game of the year in the ACC. I missed by a catastrophic mile. October 5th, the Clemson Tigers come to Doak. Do you want to watch that game? Yeah. Just over a game ago, going back-to-back games, the end of one, the beginning of another, Clemson had 12 straight drives with touchdowns. How do you think that's going to go with DJ on the other sideline, getting ready to come out and take snaps for the Noles? This could be a bloodbath. And it's possibly the beginning of the death march for Norvell and his staff. The next game they play, have a bye week after Clemson. They play a Friday night game against Duke on the 18th. It's on the road. Then they go to Miami Gardens to play in Hard Rock against the Hurricanes. Good luck. They come back home for North Carolina. That's on the 2nd. Then they go up north. You don't know what you're going to get with Notre Dame, but I doubt they're going to win there. November 9th against the Irish. 2 weeks after that, they come home against Charleston Southern. And finally, as always, they finish the season against their old rival, the Florida Gators, this time in Doak Campbell. Florida's quarterback situation is good. Florida State's is not. Right now, Florida's the better team. And they're getting ready to fire their coach, and they're the better team. Think about that. Their passing attack is light years ahead of Florida State. They have guys that actually complete passes, make shots down the field, etc. Their true freshman is better than DJ by a mile. So, with all of that, a few more things that I want to just interject. I have seen some crazy turnarounds in coaching tenures. I've seen guys take longer to get it going. A great example, when I first started watching college football, McCartney at Colorado, mid-'80s. They were awful. They were garbage. Took him 5 years. He started getting kids from LA, New Orleans, Detroit, all over the country. Took him longer. It's harder to recruit to Colorado. They don't have much of a base. So it's a different situation. Now, I know Florida State was running to the ground and Willie Taggart stunk. I would take Norvell over Taggart, although some of you in my live chat disagreed. Taggart's still worse. It's not close. But at the same time, Florida State, this is year 5. The high school recruiting, let's be honest, the complete reliance on the portal in certain situations is coming home to roost. The misses at critical positions, as I noted at the outset of the show, it's beyond a problem. This staff lacks recruiters. And this staff right now, at least to some degree, lacks the ability to develop. Not everybody. There's a few coaches on the staff who are really, really good. But overall, how much of this worked out because of coaching last year? I mean, they obviously deserve credit. They went undefeated in the regular season. I'm not going to take away from that. But how much of it was the portal and all the transfers just lightning in a bottle? This is something we're probably going to talk about for years. I don't know the answer. But right now, I am all in on it's eventually going to happen for Norvell, exit stage right, because he's not a good enough recruiter, relies too much on the portal and development, because the guys he hired on his staff is not getting done. The linebacker position obviously has struggled. They gave up 213 yards to SMU on the ground. They just moved into the Power 4. Come on, man. Come on. That's ridiculous. And Florida State was out-recruited in the portal by them. It's ironic here. Both teams have used the portal to build their lines. Well, FSU didn't do as well running the ball, that's for sure. They're averaging 65.2 yards per game. Most experienced line in the country. And they stink. They stink. SMU has 5 transfer guys, and they just ran it right down Florida State's throat. Hats off to them. But when that's happening, there's no way at this point at 1-4 with the schedule I just mentioned, again, Clemson, at Duke, at Miami, North Carolina, at Notre Dame, Charleston, Southern, and Florida. If they win 3 of those, I'd be shocked. I mean, they just all but quit in the last couple series of that game against SMU. You could tell we're on the brink there. There could be a quitting moment against Clemson if it gets out of hand before halftime. That's just the way I see it. I hope I'm dead wrong on that, because that's not going to be much fun for me or any of you. But that schedule right there, it's not the SEC, but it's not easy. Clemson's pretty hot. Obviously, Miami's pretty good. Notre Dame's pretty good. Florida, you don't know what you're going to get. Charleston Southern's the only game they're going to win for sure. Duke and North Carolina, Ward only knows. But which game outside of Charleston Southern do you say Florida State's the team that's going to win? Which one? If they beat them and nobody else, the Noles win 2 out of 12. Is that survivable? Mike McCartney took over Colorado. That's a different deal. Norvell took over Florida State. They had far more talent than when McCartney took over that job. It was like 83 or 84, something like that at the University of Colorado. I mean, that's a long time ago. I just don't see how he's going to survive. And that brings up a couple other key questions. Right now, I want you to think about this, and I'm going to bring this question up again after I make another comment. Florida State is struggling at quarterback, obviously, offensive line, obviously, and periodically at D-line, especially as it relates to slowing down the run. They've got a ton of seniors, 5th-year seniors, and 6th-year seniors getting all the reps at most of these spots, and they're not doing well. Do you think Florida State in 2025 will be better at quarterback, O-line, and D-line without any of their current players really getting a lot of reps other than some on the D-line. Like, obviously, Glenn's not getting hardly any reps at quarterback. He threw 4 passes the other night. O-line is almost exclusively seniors. D-line, pretty much the same deal. How do we expect to, those are arguably the 3 most important areas, O-line, D-line, and quarterback. How do you expect to take a big step up next year when you have to? Because if he has a bad year, next year's getting canned. Well, I don't think he is. Why should I? I don't trust him in the portal anymore because he missed too much. Too many of the guys that they brought in for the portal have missed. Not all, but too many have missed now. They finally caught up to him. Recruiting's okay, but it's not where it needs to be. They're in the 30s by some rankings, 40 by others, etc. It kind of fluctuates in that area. It's nowhere near where it needs to be, obviously. Why should I believe? So again, as I wrap up, and we'll talk more tomorrow about the top college football programs. There's 18 teams. Bud Elliott talks about all the time with his recruiting rankings and stuff that he does. We have the exact same list, ironically. The 18 teams that can win a national title. Florida State is one of them, historically speaking, since 1980 to present day. Are they even number 15 in that list right now? 16? Auburn might be worse. They're awful. But outside of Auburn, how many teams in those 18 is Florida State ahead of? And I'm going to talk about this ad nauseum on Monday. But Florida State is going in the wrong direction at a rapid rate. This is Norvell's program now. It's year 5. I think year 6 is going to be the end. So again, going into Monday, going to do another show. Going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to discuss what can happen for Florida State. What can happen that would get them turned around when you got so many guys at quarterback, O-line, and D-line that are struggling. Not just struggling. They're awful right now at a lot of spots. Why would we believe that's going to change? This has been a rough episode, but I'm not going to sit here and just tell people the wrong thing. I'm going to be honest. If you can't handle honesty, this Locked On podcast for the Seminoles is not for you. Right now, it's not much for me either, but I will not lie. I think Florida State is in a heap of trouble now and, quite honestly, for the next couple of years. That's what I see. They're going to have to change coaches. It'll probably happen after next year, financial reasons and all that. But that's where I see it. We'll talk about more of this and go into more detail on Monday. But that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles football with me. It really means a great deal. Thank you once again, and I will see you on Monday.